Hey friend, Chris Vandeviver here from WhyLogicProRules.com, the website that helps you get the most you can out of Apple's Logic Pro. Today I want to show you how you can mix and export the individual drums from a third-party drum plugin, such as EZDrummer, Superior Drummer, or something like Battery from Native Instruments. How to process and export these within the context of Logic and not just within that EZDrummer plugin or within that Battery plugin. You know, Logic makes it so easy to work with Drum Kit Designer and Drum Machine Designer, whether we want to just work with a single track lane of the entire performance or as a track stack with each of the individual drums parsed out across the mixer and the tracks area. In fact, if I introduce a new instance of Drummer, and we'll just use Rock for now, we have an instance of Kyle here, and we have Drum Kit Designer loaded right onto this one channel strip. If we open up the mixer, you know, we have the one channel strip that we can work with. And we can take a listen to the performance. Or we can have a track stack of this instrument that gives us way more power over fine-tuning the performance. So if we go to the sounds here, under Drum Kit, Producer Kits, and then find the SoCal Producer Kit. Now we have a track stack, and check it out. We have the overheads, the kick, the snare. Everything's broken apart for us to fine-tune, to adjust the volume, the panning, use plugins. You know, there's so much versatility here. But when it comes to software instruments that don't come with Logic, such as EZDrummer and Battery, how can you pull apart these drum instruments so you can have access to those individual parts as well, not just within their plugins? So first I want to show you how to export these individual drum parts. In this case, I have Kyle loaded up with EZDrummer. And let's just take a quick listen to the performance. It should be the same, but with a different drum instrument. Awesome. First things first, we're going to select this region and go down to Convert, and we're going to convert this drummer region to a MIDI region. And now instead of having a drummer region, we have a little more access to the MIDI notes or performance, you know, on a note-by-note basis. Perfect. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to right-click on this region and go down to MIDI and separate by note pitch. What has happened is now those individual notes for the kick, the snare, the hats are now on their own track lanes in the tracks area. So this here is actually just the kick and this is just the snare. But if we look at the mixer, we don't have any new channel strips in the mixer. All of these individual tracks are still part of the one channel strip. So we don't have individual channel strips to process yet. We just have a slightly different view of the one channel strip. And just to demonstrate, let me try to solo just the kick. You can see that every one of these track lanes are soloed as well. So to just listen to just the kick, we actually have to use the Control S option to solo on a per region basis, or the button right up here in the control bar. So take a listen. The snare, the hats. Cool, so we're halfway between being able to mix these individual elements, but we're able to export them now if we needed to. So if you wanted to export these tracks to load into a new Logic session for mixing, or be able to export to send these files to a separate mix engineer so they have more access and control over the sound of the drums. To do that, let's select all of the track lanes and then go to File, and go down to Export, and we're going to export these 9 tracks as audio files. I've done this a couple times. Let me just quickly get rid of some of these folders. We're going to create a new folder. And we're going to call it Drum Tracks. Cool, this is where we're going to export these individual track lanes to. But the thing that's coming to my mind right now is that what we're going to name these files is going to be based on the track name, but each of the track names are just instrument 1. So we need to change that right now. So I'm going to take a moment here just to change all these names. Cool, so once again, let's select everything. And this time I'm just going to use the key command, Command E, and we're going to export these into the drum tracks folder. Okay, let's export right now. Awesome, so we have all these new audio files. And if we take a look in the Finder here, we can see we have just about everything, except we don't have the crash. And we know there's a note for this crash performance. It's right there, yet we don't have an audio file for it. The reason for that, if we double click, is that if we zoom in on this crash, it turns out that the crash note begins a little before the actual region and bar 1. So we actually need to make an adjustment here to make sure that this note is within the boundary of the area that we are exporting. As in this case, we can't actually export anything before bar 1. And in fact, there's actually a kick note as well that's just before the region as well. So let's bring that in. And I'm going to re-export the kick and the crash. So let's export now. And if we go back to the Finder, check it out. We now have that crash, and we also have a new kick file because I made that adjustment and re-exported. So let's just move this first kick to the trash, and let's drag these into the session. We'll create new tracks. And look at that. We have our entire performance here. If we solo, perfect. Let's just get rid of these for now. Okay, the next thing is how do we mix the different drum elements separate from one another? So far, we've only pulled apart the individual notes that makes it easy to export, but we again don't have access to the individual channel strips for the kick, the snare, the hi-hats, and all the rest of the drum instruments. In that case, I'm going to back this up so that we have that single drummer region again. And this time, I'm going to go to EZDrummer, I'm going to select it, and under EZDrummer Demo, I'm going to make sure to set the instrument as a multi-output instrument. At this point, we're going to go into EZDrummer. You can see I'm running a demo. And in the Mixer tab here, we have to set up an individual output for each of the drum elements. So if we select right underneath the value here for the fader, we can set different outputs. So we're going to set this to output 1 for the kick. The snare is set to output 2, output 3, and I'm going to go through and do the rest right now. We're now going to go into the mixer, and right here we have a plus and minus button. And as we press the plus button here, we're introducing new channel strips for each of those different drum elements that we routed to different outputs out of EZDrummer. So if we solo the instrument 1 channel strip now, and if we continue to parse these out real quick, as we create new channel strips by pressing the plus button, those different drum elements are being routed to different channel strips right down here. So now this, instead of being the kick and the snare and the hi-hat, it's just the kick. If we solo right here, we have the snare with a little bleed from the kick, a little bit of hi-hat. And if we continue soloing, we'll see the other drum elements perform. And at this point, we can name this just, snare. We can name this kick. We can name this hi-hat. And now we can process these individual drum elements with EQ, with compression, and anything else that you'd like. And the great part about multi-output instruments is that the channel strips only take up space in the mixer instead of the tracks area. But of course, you could right-click and then separate by note pitch. And let's take a listen now. So you have the track lanes and the mixer strips for mixing and adjusting the performance. The biggest thing to keep in mind is multi-output instrument, and you'll have to go into the mixer within that instrument and set up each individual drum on its own output. Let's now do the same for battery. I actually have battery hidden right up here. Loaded up a drummer performance as well. And for now, we're just going to delete all of this. So instead of going through the process of separating by note pitch, I'm just going to show you in battery how you can create a multi-output instrument and set each to its own output for each drum. If we take a quick listen to this performance, if we take a look inside battery, it's a little more work to do this because you have to identify which drum is actually being performed. So we have to watch the performance. But if you right-click on the individual pads and go down to Output, you can set a direct out for a specific set of outputs. So if we take a look at battery over here, I've already set battery as a multi-output stereo instrument. And I've gone through the different pads that are actually being performed, and I've set their output to different direct outs. So if we take a look at some of the other options here. Take a look at the output, direct out, it's set to 910. So the same process. We go into the mixer, we press the plus button, we can introduce individual channel strips for those individual drums. And once again, you can just right click on the region, separate by note pitch, or go down to MIDI, separate by note pitch. And there we have our individual performances on their respective channel strips of this multi-output instrument. Awesome. And I generated these performances using Drummer. You can load any drum instrument of your choice onto a Drummer track, and then the individual drummers will use that instrument instead of Drum Kit Designer or Drum Machine Designer, and they will use any instrument of your choice. So I hope that was helpful for you. If it was, as always, I highly recommend subscribing to the YouTube channel, Why Logic Pro Rules, or subscribing on the website itself, whylogicprorules.com. Every week I'm posting new videos, new emails, and posts to help you get the most you can out of Apple's Logic Pro. Thanks so much.